simkhumbuza Winnie Mandela. Oh, ibambeni webafana. Oh, ibambeni webhoko. Oh, ibambeni webafana. Oh, ibambeni. Iyo yo yo isibam salabafazi sesingu. Oh, yo Winnie Mandela. Oh, isibam salabafazi sesingu. Winnie Mandela. Oh,
Viva ANC, viva! Good morning, comrades. Let me take this opportunity of acknowledging the director of the program, Comrade Weziwe, who's also the deputy convener of the ANC here in KwaZulu-Natal, and all the officials of the province, Comrade Tau, Comrade Dixon Masimula, who is the convener of the NEC in KwaZulu-Natal, and all the members of the National Executive Committee who are present here this morning, the Veterans League, and all the regional task team members who are gathered here, the leadership of the Women's League, the Youth League, the leadership of COSATU, led by Comrade Duma, and the leadership of SANCO, led by Comrade Dube, all delegates from our branches, good morning. We gather this morning at this provincial Lekgotla, not for ritual, not for routine, and not for rhetoric. We gather at a decisive historic moment in the life of our movement and in the life of this province. 30 years after the adoption of the Constitution of the Republic, and more than a century since the founding of our movement, the ANC, we confront a moment that demands clarity, that demands courage and consequence. The era of liberation legitimacy has matured into the era of performance legitimacy. Our people, who entrusted us with democratic breakthrough way back in 1994, now demand that this promise of that breakthrough be fully realized in their daily lives. The ballot has become not merely an instrument of liberation, but also an instrument of accountability. This is not a crisis of the revolution. It is a maturation of democracy itself. This Lekgotla, therefore, must not be content with analysis alone. It must produce direction. It must align our provincial program of action for 2026 with the January 8 statement of the NEC and with the directives of the last NEC Lekgotla. It must also translate ideological commitment into material change. For we are not a debating society as ANC. We are a movement of transformation. Our mandate remains the pursuit of a national democratic society, a society that is non-racial, non-sexist, united, democratic, and prosperous, which is fundamentally anchored in social justice. That objective has not changed. What has changed is the terrain upon which we must advance it. The National Democratic Revolution was never conceived as a single event. It was and remains a process of dismantling colonial and apartheid power relations, transforming patterns of ownership and control, deepening democracy, and constructing a developmental state capable of intervening decisively in the economy to uplift the historically marginalized people. The democratic breakthrough of 1994 secured only political power in the state. But the deeper transformation of the economic heights, the restructuring of production, and the eradication of poverty, unemployment, and inequality remain unfinished tasks. The people are not impatient for symbolism. They are impatient for delivery. We must therefore confront this reality before us without any defensiveness. The 2024 electoral outcome was a message. It was not a rejection of the ideals of the National Democratic Revolution. It was a warning that the pace, the visibility, and impact of transformation must be accelerated. It was a call for renewal, organizationally, morally, and administratively. It was the electorate of South Africa and in this province asserting that historic memory alone cannot sustain future support. We must hear their message with humility, and we must respond with discipline. You know that KwaZulu-Natal occupies a uniquely strategic position in this moment. It is the second most populous province of the Republic. It is the second largest contributor to national economic activity. It hosts the busiest port on the continent and a strategic export hub in Richards Bay. It carries, therefore, immense cultural, political, and economic weight. When KwaZulu-Natal moves, the Republic feels it. When KwaZulu-Natal stabilizes, the nation stabilizes. But when KwaZulu-Natal falters, the consequences reverberate nationally. The responsibility, therefore, is resting on us in this province, in scope, but national in consequence. We meet also within the context of a government of provincial unity, a product of electoral arithmetic and political maturity. We must therefore approach this terrain not with confusion, but with strategic clarity. Coalition governance is not alien in our history. From the Congress Alliance of the 1950s to the Government of National Unity of 1994, our movement has always understood that unity of purpose does not mean unity in uniformity, not unity as well of uniformity and identity. What matters is whether such configurations advance or retard the program of building a national democratic society. Our participation, therefore, in governance must always be guided by that question. Comrade, 2026 is a local government election year. Local government is that sphere of government that is closest to the people. It will determine the credibility of our renewal. Local government is not a peripheral arena. It is the front line of democracy. It is where water flows, as Mahlobo knows. It is where refuse is collected or neglected. It is where electricity connects homes or remains a mere promise. If we are to restore faith, it will not be through slogans, but through functioning of municipalities, of responsive ANC councillors, and visible service delivery. We must also situate this year within a broader historic era and arc. In 2026, we mark the 30th anniversary of the adoption of our Constitution, a document that entrenched fundamental rights, but also imposed fundamental obligations upon the state to progressively improve the quality of life of all citizens. The Constitution did not mandate passive governance. It mandated a developmental state, a state capable of planning, coordinating, regulating, and intervening in pursuit of equity and growth. The development state doctrine is not optional. It is inherent in our constitutional design. Where state capacity weakens, transformation also weakens. Where institutions falter, confidence also erodes. Strengthening state capacity is therefore not a technocratic housekeeping, but it is a revolutionary responsibility. History, as we all know, does not wait for those who hesitate. Every generation of our movement has faced a defining test. The generation of 1912 of Dube, Sam, and others faced exclusion from the Union of South Africa. The generation of the 1950s faced repression and treason trials. The generation of the 1970s and the 1980s faced exile, imprisonment, and martyrdom. Our generation faces a different but no less significant test. Can we convert political power into tangible socio-economic transformation at scale? As President Oliver Tambo once reminded us, the future is not something we enter. The future is something we create. That injunction, comrades, was not a poetic sentiment. It was a call to discipline construction. Therefore, the future of KwaZulu-Natal will not be inherited automatically. It will be shaped by the clarity, by the unity, and by the resolve we demonstrate in this moment? Can we renew this movement internally while governing effectively externally? Can we consolidate democratic gains while advancing economic restructuring? These are the questions that will define us. Let this Lekgotla, therefore, be remembered not as a gathering of reflection alone, but also as a turning point of implementation. Let it send a message to every branch, to every councillor, to every public representative, and to every cadre that 2026 will be a year of visible acceleration. Our people are watching. The youth is waiting. The continent observes us still as a beacon of possibility. We cannot drift. We must consolidate our organizational base. We must traverse the difficult terrain with unity and with discipline. We must advance decisively toward the full realization of the national democratic society. Comrades, any serious program of action must begin with a sober assessment of the material conditions in which we operate. Politics does not occur in abstraction. It is rooted in the lived realities of our people. KwaZulu-Natal today stands at the intersection of enormous strategic opportunity and deep structural contradictions. As I've said, it is the second most populous province in the Republic. It is one of the principal contributors to the national economic output. It hosts the business port and the eThekwini, and it contains the industrial development zone in Richards Bay, which is a major export gateway for coal and other strategic minerals. Its geography alone situates us as a hinge province for the Southern African region. And yet, despite these immense assets, poverty, unemployment, and inequality remain stubborn and very pervasive. This contradiction between strategic economic infrastructure and persistent underdevelopment defines the political economy of KwaZulu-Natal. It is the classic dilemma of a peripheralized growth model. Wealth flows through this province, but too little of it transforms the lives of the majority. We always see containers move, ships dock, commodities are exported. Yet township economies remain fragile, rural districts remain underdeveloped, and youth unemployment remains dangerously high. This reality compels us to ask a simple question. How does a province so central to continental trade still struggle to absorb its own labor force into productive activity? The answer lies not in fatalism, but in structural design. For decades, the economy of this province like the economy of the Republic, was shaped to serve colonial extraction and apartheid accumulation. Logistics infrastructure was designed to export raw materials, not to develop and build diversified local industry. Industrial zones were structured to serve enclaves of capital rather than broad-based participation. The democratic breakthrough gave us political power, but restructuring economic patterns requires deliberate state intervention. KwaZulu-Natal is therefore a testing ground for the doctrine of developmental state. A development state is not a bureaucratic slogan. It is a state that coordinates investment, that directs infrastructure expansion, that builds industrial capacity, that protects nascent sectors, and aligns public and private capital towards inclusive growth. It understands that growth without transformation reproduces inequality, and that transformation without growth becomes unsustainable. Our task, therefore, is to achieve both simultaneously. The balance of forces in this province is very fluid. Electoral outcomes of 2024 altered the configuration of power. The rise of populist formations, the persistence of opposition consolidation, and the fragmentation of traditional lower bases all signal a competitive and contested terrain. But we must not confuse electoral volatility with ideological defeat. The aspirations of the majority of our people remain aligned with principles of non-racialism, non-successes, and justice and economic transformation. What has shifted is the impatience and the patience of the electorate. Our communities are less tolerant of underperformance. They are more willing to experiment politically. They are demanding visible improvement in their quality of life. This is not counter-revolution. It is democratic accountability. In analyzing this political environment, we must acknowledge the spatial inequality within this province. The urban core of eThekwini and surrounding industrial corridors contrast very sharply with underdeveloped rural districts in the north and south. Service delivery backlogs, inadequate infrastructure in deep rural areas, and limited access to economic opportunity create that fertile ground for political instability and demagoguery. Where our state is absent or slow, frustration grows. Where frustration grows, opportunism enters. The most effective antidote to political volatility is not rhetoric, but performance. At the same time, KwaZulu-Natal possesses extraordinary potential for sectoral expansion. The logistics corridor linking Durban, Pietermaritzburg, and Gauteng can anchor manufacturing, revitalization. Agro-processing potential in rural districts can drive rural industrialization. Tourism, both cultural and coastal, remains under-leveraged. The port modernization program underway therefore provides an opportunity to localize supply chains and expands skills development. But all these opportunities, comrades, will not automatically translate into jobs unless our province actively aligns procurement, infrastructure planning, skills training, private sector investments towards local beneficiation. Youth unemployment in this province is not merely an economic statistics. It is a strategic concern. A generation without access to employment or meaningful participation in the economy becomes susceptible to political manipulation and social instability. Our economic strategy, therefore, must be youth-centered, skills-driven, and industrially anchored. We must integrate technical and vocational education and training institutions with industrial policy. We must connect port expansion with artisan training. We must align municipal infrastructure projects with local enterprise development. Developmental state practice is about coordination, not fragmentation. Furthermore, crime and corruption have a direct economic consequences. Investor confidence declines where instability rises. Infrastructure costs increase where theft, where sabotage proliferate. Our communities lose trust where public funds are misused. The economic and political spheres are inseparable. If we seek growth, we must share and secure stability. If we seek transformation, we must enforce integrity. Comrades, the political economy of KwaZulu-Natal should not be defined by despair. It is defined by unrealized potential. The structural contradictions we confront are not permanent features. They are inherited patterns awaiting us to transform. But transformation requires coherence. It requires policy certainty. It requires disciplined governance. And above all, it requires a movement, an ANC that understands that economic questions are in fact political questions. If we are to rebuild that confidence in this province, we must demonstrate that the ANC remains the only political formation with the ideological clarity, historic depth, and institutional experience to convert strategic geography into a shared prosperity. The people of KwaZulu-Natal are not asking for miracles. They are asking a movement to be visible. Our responsibility, therefore, in 2026 is to ensure that these vast economic arteries that pass through this province begin to nourish its own communities more directly. Only then will the promise of a national democratic society move from aspiration to material reality in the daily lives of our people. The government of provincial unity, as you all know, is not an accident of history. It is, as I've said, an electoral arithmetic and democratic maturity. The outcome of the 2024 elections altered that configuration of power in this province and requires political adaptation. As an ANC that is rooted in constitutional democracy, we do not reject the will of the people, of the electorate, but we must interpret it and we must respond to it, and we govern within its parameters. Coalition governance is therefore not a concession of principle, but an expression of democratic responsibility. Coalition politics is not foreign in our tradition, as I've said. The ANC, born in 1912, as a convergence of traditional leadership, professionals, clergy, and activists. The Congress Alliance of the 1950s united workers, women, youth, communists under a common program. The Government of National Unity of 1994 reflected our commitment to inclusive stability during the transition period. What has always mattered is not the composition of alliances, but whether they advance the program of building a non-racial, non-sexist, democratic, and prosperous society. Therefore, the government of provincial unity must be assessed through a very simple test. Does it stabilize governance, improve service delivery, and protect constitutional order? Where it does, we must defend it. Where it obstructs transformation or becomes a platform for paralysis, we must confront such tendencies decisively. Coalition governance must never mean ideological dilution or administrative stagnation. It must be managed with discipline, clarity, and constant vigilance. We must also acknowledge the fluid and precarious nature of the present coalition configuration. The attempt on the 15th of December last year to destabilize the provincial government through a vote of no confidence was not an isolated incident. It was a calculated test to institutional stability. It demonstrated that elements within the provincial political landscape are prepared to pursue instability as a strategy. We must therefore expect more attempts of 15 December. We must not be surprised by them. Political contestation is legitimate in a democracy. Destabilization through opportunistic maneuvering is not. Our response must become Chief Whip Zuma. It must be legal, it must be strategic, and must be unified. At the heart of the coalition management lies clarity of purpose. We cannot afford confusion within our own ranks. Our caucuses must be disciplined, super. Communication must be consistent, engagement with partners must be principled and documented. Public messaging must reassure our citizens that governance remains stable and focused on delivery. Coalition politics punishes ambiguity. Where internal disunity is visible, external actors exploit it. Our strength in this environment will derive not from numerical dominance, but from coherence and discipline. We must therefore sharpen our skills in coalition negotiations. The era of single-party dominance at provincial level has given way to more complex arrangements. This demands new competencies from our cadres that are negotiating, but negotiating without surrender, compromise without capitulation, partnerships without loss of identity. We must train our cadres, prepare our public representatives for this new terrain. Coalition governance is not managed through emotional reaction, but it must be managed through structural engagement, constant dialogue, and strategic foresight. At the same time, we must be honest about the political forces seeking to reshape KwaZulu-Natal. There are tendencies that mobilize on grievance, that exploit economic frustration, that present simplistic solutions to complex structural challenges. There are forces that seek to personalize politics, that substitute institutional accountability with charismatic authority, and that frame destabilization as renewal. We must therefore respond to such tendencies not with panic, but with ideological clarity. The defense of constitutional democracy is not negotiable. Parliamentary sovereignty, authoritarian populism, or ethnic mobilization have no place in the architecture of our democratic constitutional order. The ANC, as we all know, deliberately chose constitutional democracy over parliamentary sovereignty in 1994. That choice entrenched rights, protected minorities, and constrained arbitrary power. It remains one of the most profound decisions in our history. We will not allow short-term maneuvering to erode that foundation. Our participation in the government of provincial unity must therefore be anchored in the protection of this constitutional order, the rule of law, and institutional stability. We must also at the same time be prepared organizationally for scenarios, continued participation in governance, as well as effective opposition should the arithmetic shift. Political maturity demands readiness for either terrain. Where we govern, we must govern competently. And where we sit in opposition, we must oppose constructively and strategically without undermining the state itself. Our people must see in us not desperation, but a steady hand. The ultimate measure of coalition governance will not be press conferences and statements or parliamentary theatrics. It will be whether water flows, mahlobo. roads, Siboniso, are repaired, clinics function normal, and communities feel heard. If the government of provincial unity delivers tangible improvement in daily life, it will neutralize destabilization. But if it falters, instability will deepen. Our task is actually very simple, straightforward. Stabilize governance, accelerate delivery, maintain ideological clarity, and preserve constitutional order. History will not judge us by how loudly we defended our position, but about how possibly we navigated this complexity. Our province, KwaZulu-Natal, deserves stability. Our people deserve predictability. The Republic of South Africa deserves a province that governs with maturity. Let this Lekgotla affirm that the ANC enters coalition politics not as the reluctant participant, but as a disciplined custodian of constitutional democracy. We all know that national government shapes policy, and provincial sphere coordinates strategy, and local government defines the lived experiences of our people. It is at municipal level, Comrade Cyril, that our people judge whether freedom translates into dignity. It is at municipal level that taps run or remain dry, that refuse is collected or left to decay, that street lights function or darkness prevails. It is here, in the everyday lives of interaction between citizens and the state, that legitimacy is either reinforced or eroded. The local government elections of 2026 will therefore not be decided by ideological debates alone, but they will be decided by our visible performance by our municipalities. We must speak candidly. The 2021 local government elections and the 2024 provincial and national elections were not simply influenced by national narratives. They reflected frustration at municipal dysfunction. Communities punished us where service delivery faltered. They withheld their support where councillors were absent, where infrastructure projects stalled, where corruption scandals surfaced, and where communication collapsed. The electorate did not abandon the values of a national democratic revolution. They expressed dissatisfaction with our execution. If we misdiagnose that message, we will repeat that error. But if we confront it honestly, we can reverse that trend. Therefore, local government is not a secondary sphere of government. It is the front line of transformation. It is the arena where spatial apartheid must be dismantled through integrated human settlements, comrades, Boniso. It is where township economies must be nurtured. It is where informal traders must be supported rather than harassed. It is where water, sanitation, electricity, and roads must meet constitutional standards. Our Constitution does not mandate theoretical governance. It mandates progressive realization of socio-economic rights. Municipalities are the delivery instruments of that constitutional mandate. We must therefore treat 2026 as a referendum on our renewal. Renewal will not be measured by internal resolutions that we pass. It will be measured by the cleanliness of our streets, reliability of our water supply, the responsiveness of our councillors, and the speed with which potholes are repaired. It will be measured by whether residents in deep rural wards feel that the state has reached them. It will be measured by whether township youth see opportunity rather than neglect. To achieve this, we must tighten our deployment standards. Our public representatives that we must choose for the local government must understand that deployment is not a reward. It is a responsibility. Councillors of the ANC must be visible in every ward. Municipal caucuses must be disciplined. Integrated development plans must be realistic, funded, and monitored. Infrastructure projects must be prioritized. They must be tracked, protected from theft and sabotage. Where underperformance persists, corrective measures must be swift. The era of tolerance, of complacency must end. We must also improve our engagement with communities. Too often, interaction occurs only during election cycles. That must change. Meetings with communities must be regular, structured, but more importantly, solution-oriented. Feedback mechanisms must be strengthened. When communities protest, our first response must be listening, not defensiveness. Trust is rebuilt through presence, not press statements. The voter psychology of 2026 will be shaped by 3 questions. Are services improving? Are leaders accessible? Is corruption being confronted? If we answer these 3 questions convincingly through action, not words, support will consolidate. But if we fail to do so, volatility will deepen. Electoral competition is no longer abstract. It is immediate. It is localized. In many wards, margins will be narrow. Small improvements in perception will determine outcomes. We must also integrate economic development into a municipal strategy. Local government must support small enterprise, local procurement, and infrastructure that enables industrial expansion. A municipality that fertilizes and facilitates local economic activity strengthens both livelihoods and political stability. A municipality that delays approvals or fails to maintain infrastructure undermines both growth and confidence. 2026 is not a distant date in the future, but is upon us. Organizational preparation must proceed in tandem with governance improvements. Branches must be active, membership processes must be credible, candidate selection must be rigorous. The candidate who carries our banner must embody competence, integrity, and community rootedness. Our communities must see in our public representatives not career politicians, but servants of the people. We do not and should not approach these elections defensively. We must approach it determined to demonstrate that the ANC has heard that message of the electorate and that we are acting on it. The path to restoring majority support does not run through rhetorical escalation. It runs through repaired infrastructure, functioning clinics, responsive councillors, and visible integrity. If we fix local government, we fix legitimacy. If we fix legitimacy, we stabilize governance. And if we stabilize governance, we create that foundation upon which economic transformation can advance. Let 2026 be the year in which local government becomes once again a source of pride for our movement and of the dignity of our people. President Nelson Mandela once said, "The true test of our devotion to freedom is the improvement of the lives of the people. That remains standard by which we will be judged in 2026, not by our history, not by our rhetoric, but by whether the daily conditions of our people visibly improve." Comrades, political stability without economic transformation is fragile. Electoral mobilization without material improvement is unsustainable. If we are to consolidate the national democratic society, we must accelerate structural economic transformation in this province. Growth alone is insufficient. Growth that excludes the majority merely reproduces inequality. Our task is inclusive growth, growth that restructures ownership, that expands productive capacity, absorbs labor, and deepens participation by historically marginalized communities. KwaZulu-Natal, as I've said, occupies that strategic position within the national and continental economy. The Port of Durban, as we know, Richards Bay remains critical export node. Logistics corridor linking Thekwini, Gauteng serve as arteries of the Southern African economy, SADC. Yet paradoxically, the communities surrounding these strategic assets often remain economically marginalized. This contradiction demands interventions. It demands deliberate, coordinated, and developmental state response. Our developmental state model is not an abstract mantra, rather than a doctrine of economic governance. It recognizes that left to itself, the market will reinforce inherited inequalities. It therefore asserts that the democratic state must plan, coordinate, regulate, when necessary, intervene to direct economic development towards inclusive outcomes. In KwaZulu-Natal, this must mean port expansion within manufacturing localization, linking infrastructure upgrades to small enterprise development, job creation, and local jobs for our young people. The logistics and the port-led industrialization must proceed. The expansion modernization underway in Richards Bay and here in Durban must not simply facilitate throughput, but must stimulate beneficiation and value addition. Manufacturing revitalization is important. The deindustrialization has eroded employment in parts of our province, as we see in places like Newcastle and so on. We must try to reverse this trend by supporting sectors such as automotive, components, chemicals, renewable energy components, and so on. Thirdly, rural industrialization and agro-processing in KwaZulu-Natal. We possess fertile agricultural land in deep rural communities with untapped productive potential. Rather than exporting raw agricultural output, we must look at expanding processing facilities closer to production areas. Youth unemployment remains one of the gravest threats to social stability and economic progress. Our economic strategy must therefore be youth-centered. Skills development must be integrated with industrial expansion. TVET colleges in KwaZulu-Natal must also align with curriculum for port operations, manufacturing processes, renewable energy installation and maintenance, and construction. Apprenticeship programs must be expanded. Where new investments occur, local hiring commitments must also be secured. Transformation also requires transforming patterns of ownership and access to capital. Broad-based Black economic empowerment must evolve from transactional compliance to productive participation. We need to ensure, comrades, that crime and corruption undermine investment and also distort competition. Infrastructure theft increases operational cost. Procurement manipulation deters ethical business. If we seek investment, we must secure that environment. Economic transformation and governance integrity are inseparable. Revolutionary morality is not a slogan, but discipline. Moses Kotane once said that the movement is only strong as the moral fiber of its cadres. That warning still resonates today with renewed force. If our moral fiber weakens, organizational strength will also weaken. If discipline erodes, legitimacy is eroded. Renewal must begin not in documents, but in our own personal conducts. It demands that those entrusted with public office understand that leadership is stewardship, not entitlement. The ANC was built by women and men who sacrificed comfort, wealth, and even life itself for the cause of freedom. That moral heritage cannot be traded for personal accumulation. If we abandon revolutionary morality, we abandon the very foundation of our historic legitimacy. We must therefore embed consequence management into our renewal program. Deployment must be linked to performance. Public representatives must be evaluated rigorously. Procurement processes must be transparent and auditable. Where misconduct is established, action must be swift and consistent. The public must see the ANC not to protect wrongdoing, but corrects it. Renewal without consequence management is theater. Renewal with discipline is transformation. We must also confront the perception gap. Even where corruption is being investigated or prosecuted, public perception remains skeptical. Transparency and communication are therefore essential. Where investigations occur, the public must be informed. Where prosecutions succeed, outcomes must be communicated. Silence breeds suspicion. Visible action restored confidence. Let therefore we as ANC must reaffirm that KwaZulu-Natal will not allow corruption, criminality, and moral complacency to define our future. We must wage a relentless struggle against crime in all its manifestations. We must defend the rule of law. We must strengthen state capacity, restore revolutionary morality as the ethical compass of our renewal. Only then can we build trust. As we know, comrades, that 1994 was very deliberate. We chose constitutional democracy over parliamentary democracy. We must participate in this national dialogue process that is underway at a national level. Our sovereignty in the contemporary world is neither isolation nor a submission. It is strategic economy. South Africa's foreign policy posture rooted in non-alignment and solidarity with the global South is not a posture of defiance. It is a posture of independence, of solidarity with the global South. The current world order, as we all know, is very fluid. Multipolar dynamics are reshaping trade, security, and diplomacy. Here in KwaZulu-Natal, we will be participating on the 21st of March of this year as part of all those forces led by the ANC. We should be marching on Constitution Hill on the 21st to ensure that our sovereignty, our constitution is confirmed. As I close, comrade, let us remember that on the 7th of March, we will commemorate the 114th anniversary of the ANC here in Durban, which will be addressed by the President of the Republic and of the ANC. That gathering must not be treated as ceremony, but as mobilization. It must demonstrate visibly that renewal in KwaZulu-Natal is not theoretical, but organizationally alive. Every region, every branch, every league must rise to the occasion and fill the stadium here in Overport, not only with numbers, but with conviction. As I've said, on 21st March, as part of the national mobilization at Constitution Hill in Johannesburg, we'll also be marching here in Durban in defense of our constitution, our non-aligned foreign policy posture, our sovereignty, and our principled opposition to imperial domination in all its forms. KwaZulu-Natal must not observe from the distance. We must be there in our numbers in this march on the 21st of March of this year. We must be visible, organized, and disciplined. For constitutional democracy and sovereign independence are not abstract principles. They are hard-won gains that require constant defense. Let this Lekgotla exist not for its ritual, but for resolve. We must ensure that this diagnosis defines our direction going into the future. We must demonstrate that KwaZulu-Natal is very serious about governance, serious about clean administration, serious about developmental planning, serious about youth employment, serious about fixing local government. History will not measure us by our internal debates. It will measure us by whether communities experience improvement in their daily lives. Let it be known that this Lekgotla, we have had our communities, we have understood them, and we are acting on their demands. The year 2026 will not be remembered as the year of defensive survival. It will be remembered as the year in which the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal steadied itself, disciplined itself, renewed itself, and moved forward with confidence. We do not consolidate to retreat, we consolidate to strengthen. We do not traverse to drift, we traverse to overcome. We do not advance to posture, we advance to transform. Let the message leave this hall with clarity and with certainty that KwaZulu-Natal will not drift into uncertainty. We will govern with discipline, we will deliver with agency, we will renew with integrity, and will restore confidence not through declaration but through demonstrated action. The future of this province will not be decided by noise. It will be decided by leadership, and we choose leadership. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Comrade Convener, for the quite elaborate political overview. Let's give him another round of applause. Thank you. I want to welcome Comrade Donald, NEC deployee. He's joined us. Beshilu, Comrade Mike, what? Some people are coming. Welcome, Comrade. We are now going to